My parents took out a third mortgage just to pour more money into my spoiled older sister's failing business. And now that everything's collapsed and they're drowning in debt, they expect me to drop out of college, move back home, and save them from the mess they created. When I was 8, I accidentally overheard my parents talking behind a closed door. My mom sighed and told my dad, "Well, since it happened, I guess we have to raise her." I didn't know who they were talking about. A few years later, I realized they meant me. My name is Lana. I'm 19. I'm a sophomore in college. Everything I have, I've earned on my own, without help, and definitely not from my family. My parents always adored my older sister, Clara. She's 23 now and has been there everything since day one. Her crayon drawings were framed on the fridge, her mistakes always brushed off. When I brought home medals from academic competitions, they didn't even ask what they were for. "Good job," my mom would mumble, eyes glued to her phone. Clara was different. They enrolled her in art school even when she didn't want to go. She got expensive dolls that she broke in a week. On my birthday, we'd sometimes get a homemade pie if they remembered. On hers, there was always a store-bought cake and a full-blown photo shoot. When I once brought it up, my mom waved her hand and said, "Stop comparing. Everyone's different." At first, I tried to earn their love. I worked hard, studied harder. I wanted them to be proud. But eventually, I realized there's no winning this game. They were never going to see me. So I stopped trying to impress them and started doing things for myself. I earned a scholarship in high school, then another one for college. I enrolled in a business program because I've always dreamed of starting something of my own. I live in a dorm, work as a tutor, and haven't called home in months. They haven't called either. No one misses anyone. The only people who've ever really had my back are my best friend and her dad, Alex. He knows everything. One day, he told me, "You're not obligated to save anyone. Your life is yours." He's the one paying the small remainder of my tuition not covered by scholarships. I swore to myself I'd pay him back someday. Every cent. And then, yesterday evening, my mom called. Her name popped up on my screen. A name I hadn't seen in ages. I almost ignored it. But something in me hesitated. I answered. "Claire's in trouble," she said, her voice shaky. "The bakery failed. We took out a third mortgage. We need your help. We need you." I froze. Bakery? Mortgage? I had no idea they'd gone into debt again. More importantly, why didn't they tell me? Turns out they'd taken out another massive loan almost a year ago to open a bakery for Clara, the same girl who can't even bake cookies. And now they wanted me to drop out of college, come home, and run the failing business. "You're smart. You'll fix it. You owe this to the family," my mom insisted. I sat in silence, boiling inside. I wanted to scream. Where were they when I needed help? Why should I save people who never once tried to save me? But all I said was, "No." And I hung up. Then I blocked them everywhere. It felt like yanking out a root that still had hold over me. I sat in my dorm room trying to breathe, but the lump in my throat didn't go away. I should have felt free. Instead, I felt guilty. Thick, sticky, undeserved guilt. For what? They only remembered me when they needed something. When things were fine, I didn't exist. When things got bad, I was suddenly their daughter. I thought I'd grown past this, that I was stronger now, but apparently one phone call was all it took to crack the armor. They called 3 more times during the night. I didn't pick up. Every new notification made me sick, not out of fear, but exhaustion. I'd already lived through this scenario in my head 1,000 times, and it still managed to burn me. They needed something again, begged again, but only because I'm the only person in their life who actually knows how to do something, not because they care about me as a daughter. The next morning, my sister texted, "If you don't come back, we'll lose everything, and you'll never see your room again." My room? The same one with the broken bed and dusty wardrobe since I was 7, with not a single photo of me on the walls. Just some faded childhood drawings of Clara? Hilarious. That place was never my home. It was their house, where I was a guest, a babysitter, a shadow. I didn't answer. I just stepped outside and walked to the campus center. I needed air. I sat on a bench near the library, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. The money I had left barely covered the rest of the month. If it weren't for my tutoring gig, I wouldn't survive. I had no backup. My parents didn't know that. And they wouldn't care. They just assumed I'd drop everything and come running. Later that day, I finally told my best friend. We've known each other since childhood. She knows me better than anyone. I explained how my parents wanted me to drop out of college to rescue Clara's failing business. She was silent for a long time. Then she said, "You don't owe them anything. No one has the right to destroy your future because of their mistakes. And hearing that, it felt like something melted in my chest, like I finally had permission to put myself first. That evening, someone knocked on my door. I opened it and froze. It was my parents. They showed up without warning. My dad held an envelope. My mom had a bag of pastries. Their faces were tense, but they tried to mask it with some kind of artificial care. I didn't say a word, just turned and walked back into my room, leaving the door open. If they wanted to talk, let them. I wasn't about to pretend this was normal. They came in, put everything down, and sat like they belonged there. They started with small talk. How was school? How was I doing? My mom even said, "You look good." I didn't reply. After a moment of awkward silence, my dad got to the point. The business was failing, Clara was depressed, the debt was crushing. They needed my help. "You're smart. Always were," he added, like that was some kind of compliment, not a manipulation. I asked why they didn't come when I was applying to college, when I didn't know how to pay for textbooks. Why didn't they call in 2 years while I was scraping by? They looked down. No answer. Just a week. "We thought you'd manage." So now I'm their last resort. When I said no, the tone shifted. My mom said that if I didn't help, they'd lose the house. "Your house," she emphasized. And that's when I realized they weren't asking. They were emotionally blackmailing me, guilt-tripping, pressuring me to feel sorry. But it wouldn't work this time. I stood up, told them I wouldn't rescue people who spent my whole life pretending I didn't exist, that I wouldn't destroy my future because Clara couldn't bake a muffin properly, that their poor choices weren't my burden. Then I opened the door and asked them to leave. They left. No drama, no yelling, just disappointment all over their faces, as if I had somehow failed them, and not the other way around. When the door clicked shut, I sank to the floor and cried. Not out of weakness, out of relief. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself. The next morning, I woke up with a weight in my chest. The room was quiet, but my head was buzzing, as if their voices were still echoing in my mind, full of orders, guilt, and manipulation. I lay in bed for nearly 30 minutes just staring at the ceiling, trying to gather the strength to move. When I finally got up, I skipped breakfast. I couldn't eat. My stomach felt like it had tied itself in a knot. Classes blurred by. I was physically present, but mentally completely absent. I couldn't stop replaying yesterday's encounter. My mother's sharp words, my father's entitled demands, my sister's smug smile. They'd sat across from me as if I were the one who had failed them, as if I owed them for the years they spent tolerating my existence. That's how it felt, like I was a tolerated inconvenience rather than a daughter. After my last class, I went straight to my dorm and shut off my phone. The notifications had been piling up. Calls from mom, texts from my sister, even a few emails. I didn't open any of them. I didn't want to read whatever threats or guilt trips they had prepared next. I just wanted silence, solitude, safety. That evening, I finally told my best friend everything, every detail, from the first phone call to the moment they walked out of the diner without paying for their food. She didn't interrupt. She just listened, holding my hand while I spoke. When I finished, she looked me in the eyes and said, "You don't owe them anything. Not your time, not your money, not your future." It was exactly what I needed to hear. She insisted that I stay with her for a few nights to reset. Her dad even offered to drive over and help me gather my essentials if I didn't feel comfortable going alone. I declined. I wasn't ready to face my dorm mates' questions or risk running into someone I knew. But I did accept her offer to spend the weekend at her house. Those 2 days felt like a breath of air after drowning. Her family treated me like I belonged. They didn't pry or pity me, just gave me space and support. Her dad made pancakes Sunday morning and left an extra plate for me in case I wasn't up to sitting at the table. It wasn't a grand gesture, but it meant more than any family dinner I'd ever had at home. That night, I sat with her on the porch swing, sipping hot chocolate, and realized something that both hurt and healed at the same time. I'd spent my entire life trying to earn love from people who had no intention of giving it. And now, for the first time, I was being given that love freely by people who had nothing to gain from it. "I think I need to talk to a lawyer," I said out loud, almost surprising myself. "You sure?" she asked, turning toward me. "Yeah, if they came to my college once, they might do it again. I need to protect myself. I need to be prepared." She nodded and texted her dad immediately. Less than 10 minutes later, he replied with the name of a family lawyer and offered to call them first thing in the morning. I cried again that night, but this time it wasn't from fear or anger. It was from relief, from being believed. from finally being safe enough to admit how scared I'd been for so long. The next day, I returned to campus and booked an appointment with the campus mental health center. I wasn't okay, but I was finally doing something about it. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a shot at a future that was truly mine. The day I walked into the legal aid clinic on campus, I felt like an imposter. Like someone was going to take one look at me and laugh. Who did I think I was? A college student trying to protect herself from her own family? What kind of drama was that? But no one laughed. The paralegal greeted me with a soft smile and asked if I'd like some water. It was a small gesture, but it calmed me. I explained everything. What happened with the loan, the business, the diner scene, how they showed up unannounced. The woman across the table took notes and asked careful, thoughtful questions. When I was done, she told me I had every right to request a no-contact order if I felt threatened, even if there wasn't physical violence. Emotional manipulation and harassment were enough. That word, harassment, hit me like a wave. I had never dared label it before. The legal team offered to connect me with someone more experienced in family law, and I agreed immediately. That same night, I called my best friend's dad and let him know. He was relieved to hear I'd taken the first step. "Good," he said. "You're protecting yourself, and that's never selfish." Over the next few days, things were calm. Too calm. My parents stopped messaging. My sister went quiet. For the first time in months, there was no new drama. And yet, instead of feeling peace, I felt dread. I knew them. Silence didn't mean surrender. It meant they were regrouping. And I was right. On Friday evening, just as I was leaving campus for a quick grocery run, I saw them. My mother and sister, standing near the campus gates, waiting like nothing was wrong. My first instinct was to run, but they spotted me. My mom called out my name, arms open, like this was some kind of happy reunion. I froze. It felt like ice was crawling down my spine. I didn't want a scene, so I said, "What are you doing here?" "We just want to talk." My sister chimed in, her voice annoyingly cheerful. "Come on, don't be so dramatic." It took everything in me not to yell. I told them I was calling campus security if they didn't leave immediately. My mother's face twisted into something I can only describe as pure contempt. "You've really become heartless," she spat. "After everything we've done for you." "You mean manipulating me and using me?" I snapped. "I'm done being your backup plan." They left finally, but not before my sister warned me. "You'll regret this." Back in my dorm, I couldn't stop shaking. The violation of it all, showing up again like they had the right to be in my life on their terms, was too much. I emailed the legal clinic that night and told them everything. The reply was swift. We needed to file for an emergency no-contact order. Saturday morning, my best friend and her dad picked me up and drove me to the attorney's office. We filled out paperwork for hours, my statement, the history, the timeline. I signed every page with a shaking hand, but also with growing resolve. I wasn't running anymore. Afterward, we all sat in a small cafe. Her dad looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you." And I believed him. It was the first time in my life I'd heard those words from someone who meant them. The temporary restraining order was granted 3 days later. When I got the email confirmation, I sat on the floor of my dorm and cried. Not out of sadness, but from a deep, confusing mix of relief, fear, and exhaustion. I hadn't slept properly in weeks, and it was like my body finally believed it could rest. The order meant they couldn't legally contact me, show up on campus, or try to reach me through third parties. Violating it would result in legal consequences. For the first time in my life, I had boundaries that weren't just emotional. They were enforceable. I printed a copy and taped it inside my dorm closet. I needed to see it every day. Not because I thought they'd forget, but because I might. I've been conditioned for so long to doubt my own reality that even after legal recognition, part of me still wondered if I was overreacting. My therapist said that was normal. Trauma makes you second-guess your instincts. I was just beginning to understand how deeply their manipulation had rooted itself in me. A few days later, my sister tried to email me using a new account. The message was short. No greetings, just, "How could you do this to your own family? You're disgusting." That was all it took for the panic to come flooding back. I forwarded it to the lawyer. They filed it as a violation. It felt petty at first, but my best friend reminded me, "It's not petty. It's proof." Still, it was hard to focus. Finals were approaching, and I couldn't afford to fall behind. So I threw myself into my coursework. Business ethics, data analysis, marketing principles, trying to drown out the noise with logic and deadlines. It helped, but only a little. One night, I broke down in the middle of writing a case study. My best friend found me at the library with my head on the table. She didn't say anything at first. She just slid a cup of hot chocolate across the table and sat down beside me. We didn't talk for almost 15 minutes. Then I whispered, "Do you think I'm a bad person?" She looked at me like I'd just asked if the sky was green. "Of course not," she said. "I think you're the bravest person I know." I don't think I believed her. Not fully, but I wanted to. Later that night, I wrote down everything I could remember about the day they showed up at campus. Not because anyone asked me to, just because I needed it out of my body. Every word they said, every look, every manipulation disguised as concern. I filled 4 pages before I stopped. When I was done, I folded the pages and slipped them into my journal. Not as evidence, as a reminder. A few days later, her dad invited me to dinner. It was just the 3 of us. Him, my best friend, and me. He cooked homemade lasagna and told awful dad jokes the whole time. For 2 hours, I forgot that I was in survival mode. After dessert, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a letter with legal letterhead, his lawyer offering to help me start the process of becoming financially independent from my parents. It wasn't just about protection anymore. It was about freedom. I held the letter in my hands for a long time. I'd been surviving for so long I didn't know what planning a future felt like. But maybe I was ready to find out. 2 weeks later, I filed the emancipation paperwork. It felt surreal walking into that office alone, like I was stepping across some invisible threshold between the version of me who begged for scraps of approval and the one who finally said, "Enough." The woman behind the desk asked me if I was sure. I said yes. I didn't stutter. The process would take time. Months, most likely. But just starting it gave me a strange sense of power. Like reclaiming something I hadn't even realized had been taken from me. In the meantime, the bakery my sister had started finally shut down for good. A friend from my hometown sent me a picture of the "for lease" sign in the window. I stared at the photo for a long time, not out of joy or vindication, but because a part of me still couldn't believe they'd let it get that bad. They mortgaged everything for her. And now they had nothing. I felt nothing. That was almost more unsettling than anger. But my therapist told me it was a healthy detachment. I wasn't emotionally numb. I was healing. The peace didn't last long. One afternoon after class, I returned to my dorm to find a small package at my door. No name, no return address, just a brown padded envelope with my first name written in black marker. I froze. I called my best friend immediately. She told me not to open it until someone else was with me. Her dad drove over in under 30 minutes. We opened it together. Inside were 2 things: a framed childhood photo of my sister and me, and a handwritten note. It read, "Blood is thicker than pride. One day you'll regret this." No signature. I felt like I was going to throw up. I handed it straight to her dad, who took photos and gave it to the lawyer. The restraining order was now a potential criminal case. I tried not to spiral, but it was like my past refused to let me move forward. The guilt came back, the doubt, the little voice whispering, "What if you're overreacting? What if they're just trying to remind you you're still family?" But I knew better. That wasn't love. That was coercion dressed as sentiment, and I was done falling for it. That night, I went back to my journal. I wrote 1 sentence. "Their house burned my wings. I'm still learning to fly, but at least I'm not on fire anymore." The next day, I met with the student advisor to discuss an early graduation track. If I took 2 summer intensives and added 1 more course this semester, I could graduate 6 months ahead of schedule. I said yes without hesitation. I wanted out, not just from my family, but from every environment that reminded me of them. By the end of that week, I'd also applied to 5 job opportunities in 3 different cities. Marketing internships, business development roles, anything that would put distance between me and the ashes of my past. When the first callback came, I cried in the library bathroom. It wasn't even a job offer, just a screening interview. But it felt like the universe had finally cracked open a window, and I was ready to climb through. I wish I could say they stopped after that package, that the restraining order scared them enough to finally let go. But people like my parents don't know when to quit. They don't see boundaries. They see obstacles. And obstacles to them are just things to be broken. A week after the incident with the package, I got a call from my college's administrative office. They said someone had tried to access my student records, claiming to be a family member. When asked for identification, the person got defensive, then left. But they had a name. It was my mother. She drove 2 hours to my campus trying to dig up anything she could. Grades, financial information, dorm address, anything. Probably to use against me. Or worse, manipulate me into guilt again. That same night, I sent another update to my lawyer. We added the incident to the case file. The judge fast-tracked our request for the restraining order, and by the end of the week, it was official. They were legally forbidden from contacting me directly, indirectly, or through third parties. Any violation would carry criminal consequences. And still, part of me was tired of waiting for justice to feel like closure. Because justice doesn't heal your nervous system. It doesn't stop the nightmares where you're back in your childhood kitchen, being told you're a burden while your sister gets another gift for doing nothing. It doesn't stop your brain from flinching when someone raises their voice too quickly. But I kept moving forward. I landed one of the interviews, a remote marketing internship in Chicago. It wasn't huge money, but it would be my first job in the field I actually wanted. My friend's dad helped me go through the paperwork. Her mom had passed years ago, and he told me that if she were here, she'd be proud of the person I was becoming. I cried when he said that. He even offered to help me find a studio apartment in the city when the time came. Meanwhile, my sister went radio silent. No texts, no posts, no calls. I later found out from a former classmate that her bakery failure had made local news, one of those entitled kids blowing their parents' money kind of segments. I didn't watch the clip. I didn't care to see the damage anymore. I had my own rebuilding to do. I started saving every paycheck, cut out unnecessary expenses, stopped eating out unless it was with someone who made me feel safe. At night, I wrote lists. What I needed for the move, what I still needed to heal, and what I never wanted to be. That last list had just one line: someone who becomes what hurt her. One day in the library, I overheard someone from my econ class tell her friend she couldn't afford next semester and might have to drop out. I remembered those feelings too well. Without thinking, I slipped a note into her notebook before leaving. If you need help finding scholarships or aid, I'm happy to share what I know. No name, no expectations, just a nudge. Maybe healing isn't just about moving on. Maybe it's also about giving others the kindness you once needed yourself. And so I kept going. Paperwork, packing, planning. No more tears for the people who only loved me when I was convenient. Just hope, steady and quiet, and finally mine. I moved out 2 months after signing the internship contract. It was the smallest apartment I'd ever seen. A 4th-floor walk-up with peeling paint and a heater that groaned like it resented being alive. But it was mine. I bought a cheap rug, secondhand plates, a desk I assembled on my own while cursing the manufacturer under my breath. The first night I slept on the floor, wrapped in a blanket my best friend had handed me with a sad smile and a hug that lasted a little too long. I cried into that blanket that night. Not because I was sad. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. The internship became a full-time offer 3 weeks in. Apparently, I had a strong voice and good instincts for branding. I didn't even realize I'd been auditioning for more than the internship. But when they handed me the letter, I smiled without thinking. I signed it without hesitation. I called my friend's dad to thank him for everything, and his voice cracked when he said, "You did all of this yourself. Don't ever forget that." I won't. My therapist says the grief will come in waves. Grief for the parents I never had, the sister who never wanted a sister, the years spent fighting for crumbs of affection that never came. And she's right. Some nights are still heavy. Sometimes I wonder if I was too harsh, too ungrateful. But then I remember the look in my father's eyes when he demanded I give up my future for his mistakes. I remember my mother walking away from the table, not because I disappointed her, but because she couldn't manipulate me anymore. That wasn't love. That was control. And I survived it. One weekend, my best friend visited. We made pancakes on a broken stovetop and danced to terrible music in my living room, which is also my kitchen and bedroom. We laughed so hard I nearly dropped the pan. She asked if I missed them, my family. I thought about it for a long time, then said, I miss the version of them I made up in my head. The version that would someday apologize, change, love me the way I needed. But that version doesn't exist. What exists now is me, still healing, still learning, still here. I haven't heard from my parents since the restraining order went through. The lawyer says they've tried to challenge it, but the judge denied every attempt. Apparently, writing that I was dead to them in a legal letter didn't help their case. I no longer check their social media or my sister's. I don't want to know what they're doing. I don't want them in my head anymore. My life is quiet, but full. I'm saving money. I'm writing again. I tutor local high schoolers on weekends, the kind who remind me of me. Quiet, ambitious, unsure if they're allowed to dream. Sometimes they ask me how I got out, and I always tell them the truth. You start by deciding that survival isn't enough. You deserve more than just making it out alive. You deserve a life you actually want to live. I didn't save my family, but I saved myself. And for once, that's enough.